Okay, so I want to express my thoughts and opinions on some of the things that are going on in the country right now. And I'm going to start off with how the left is becoming more radical. Seemingly day by day, it's getting worse. They're getting more violent. They're doing, just more radical stuff than they have done ever, really, in a long time. I mean, I haven't been alive to see anything worse than they're doing right now. I can't speak for before me, but as far as I've seen, as far as I've been alive, I haven't seen the left be this radical. And the right doesn't seem to be getting... I mean, the right is, the far right is becoming more hardcore, I guess you could say, but they're not becoming anywhere near as radical as the left, in my opinion. And while the left might think that they're fighting for the greater good of the working class people, blue-collar people, we got to remember that Vladimir Lenin was also fighting, in his eyes, he was also fighting for the working class people. He was fighting for the peasants. I mean, during the Bolshevik Revolution, it was more of a peasant uprising than anything. In his eyes, he was fighting to bring peasants out of where they were, really. And, well, we all see where that had led to. It led to the making private ownership of land illegal. So everything was all public housing, the complex, as we can see. And then all the other stuff that Lenin brought to the Soviet Union. Now, during the Russian Empire, I'm not saying it was too much better, especially with the serfs. They're basically slaves. But with Lenin, when he passed, it ushered in Stalin, which was not Lenin's actual wishes. But Stalin ended up taking control, and then the Soviet Union, well, it just really went downhill from there in terms of freedoms and, well, how many people he murdered or had killed. Now, what is to say that something like that couldn't happen here if the left, or if the far left cannot get their way and they usher in, or they attempt to usher in their own Bolshevik style revolution? Who's to say that Antifa, BLM, and NFAC aren't going to be the Red Armies of the modern day America in a Bolshevik style revolution? Who's to say they're not going to be the ones that are going to try to take it over? And whoever's pulling the strings, possibly George Soros, I don't know. But whoever comes into power, if that were to happen, who's to say that something terrible like Joseph Stalin would come to power and we could see mass murder here through a dictatorship? These are just my thoughts and opinions. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I don't know the likelihood of anything like that happening. But it's a possibility, and history repeats itself, or, very similarly repeats itself. And who's to say that we're not under an attempted change of power right now with the far left who's to say the far left isn't going to attempt to try to usher in communism or socialism? I mean, they could be the same thing. But who's to say that they're not going to try to do that? Now, nobody can say, oh, that can't happen here, or that can't happen to me, because it damn sure can happen to you, and it damn sure can happen here. I'm not saying it's likely to happen, and my reasoning for that is the Bolshevik Revolution mainly went off without a hitch the way it did. The storming of the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, it only went down that way because, well, basically everyone there surrendered to the Red Army that was invading. Now the biggest difference here is there's a lot of people still loyal to the government. There's a lot of people who will still fight against a communist takeover or a revolution of that magnitude. There's a lot of people that aren't going to let that happen. But nevertheless, it could still happen. Now, one thing that happened under Stalin's reign was the secret police. The secret police would go into people's homes and they would take everything of personal ownership and they would confiscate it. They would also essentially kidnap people who they thought were enemies, and they were never seen again. They were obviously killed. The government took crops to feed their own. People were forced into labor camps. They were forced to make weapons. They were forced to produce food. And this is all a part of communism, obviously. And that could happen here if something like that were to happen. Now, obviously, if something like that were to happen, in my eyes, in my opinion, that would be a definite bug-out situation. I'm getting the hell out away from all of this if that were to go down. And guys, it would be a lot of people that would have to fight against them in order for it to not work. Because empires rise and fall. They're all throughout history. And the United States is not a guaranteed empire to stay afloat. I'm not saying I have faith in this country. I'm just saying every empire has risen and fallen at some point. And we don't know when it'll fall. But as I said, history repeats itself. And eventually, the United States won't be able to last forever, indefinitely. It's the cold, hard truth. I'm not being unpatriotic. I'm being a realistic person. Anyways, guys, those are just my thoughts. I think everyone should have the thought in the back of their head that it is possible for a Bolshevik-style revolution to happen in this country, the consequences of that happening, and what you can do to prepare for it. Now, there's not a whole lot you could do if it were to happen, but you can still be ready for it to a degree. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this one. Y'all have a good one.